Familiar, Book 10, Indelible Chapter 1. The glow of their home filled Sonic's vision, replacing the silver sheen lighting the path from the moon above them as it spilled out onto the sand from uncovered windows. He and Tails trekked along the path, groceries in tow. As the world darkened around them, shopping had taken significantly longer than anticipated, and time seemed to move differently in the world. Tails had explained that a couple of hours there could be half a day on their island, hence why they always left early.
We'll need to talk about this with Amy,
Tails said as they brushed through the final reaching branches of the forest and onto the sandy path towards home. In each hand, they held bags packed tightly with groceries, yet lacking a fragment. Regardless of their efforts, they had been able to find even a hint of a shard in the store. Not that Sonic found he could be upset. Relief had flowed through him at the thought of the shards being tied only to the island. Strangers couldn't snatch up his lost pieces. Sonic nodded.
She'll want to help. How are we going to find them, though?
He asked, tilting his head towards Tails when the crashing of the waves threatened to drown out his friend's voice. Tails smiled, hoisting his bag over his shoulder so it sat more comfortably.
We'll go back to the ring world of cars. It's the best place to find information, but the officers there see everything and everything. If this person has gone there, we'll be able to find out more.
Hope sparked in Sonic's heart and he nodded, turning away as his thoughts drifted. Soon, he would finally have his memories restored. Hence, they kicked the sand from their shoes as they ascended the steps, the gentle clattering of pots and clinking of cutlery and euphony to their ears after the chatter of the new world. The warmth inside was fleeting, the air holding only the faintest of heat upon it, leaving them shivering upon entering. Amy stood at the counter, her arms deep in the woven basket she had taken to the orchard. Her eyes brightened when she saw them and she pulled out a couple of apples, placing them in the fruit basket and turning back to lower the heat on the stove.
Hey, guys!
She greeted them, a blinding smile spreading across her lips as she continued to pull out the fruits of her earlier efforts.
I just got home a few minutes ago. The orchard needed to be weeded.
She shrugged, looking away from their curious gazes. Sonic had a feeling she had spent extra time there solely to weed the garden. If she did want to speak of it, he wouldn't force her to, however.
We got loads of stuff,
He said instead, dropping down his 2 bags almost bursting with groceries. Tails copying him, Amy's eyes widened in delight at the mention of food and she peered into the bags thoughtfully.
That's great! I put some of the stew from last night on already, but we can prepare something nice tomorrow.
Tails set about helping her put everything away while Sonic took a seat at the kitchen bench, drumming his fingers on the counter. Amy looked so happy, now, humming to herself as she twirled around the kitchen. She seemed so bubbly compared to that morning, and he hated to ruin her mood, but they needed to discuss this or he may never have his memories returned.
Tails and I were talking.
He began, eyes pleading Tails to help him out. Tails only shot him a shrug and reassuring smile. Traitor. Amy's hand stilled from where she was twisting a pear between her fingers, before she quickly placed the fruit away, and...
Really?
We wanted to try and track down the person who took my memories. We think if we can find them, we can convince them to return them.
Amy nodded slowly, her eyes lingering on the pear as she thought.
You think we can convince them?
Sonic smiled.
We can find a way, I'm sure of it. We want to go to the ring world tomorrow and ask around, see if anyone has heard of someone who fits the description.
Well, it's a good plan. We'll need to make sure we're prepared for anything. Though, they sound strong.
Sonic couldn't argue with that. If they had the ability to take down 2 super-powered creatures, he shivered at the thought of what else they could do.
Well, be careful, don't worry. We can ask around tomorrow to see if anyone knows the extent of their abilities and any potential weaknesses.
Tails chipped in, shutting the fridge and leaning against it.
Like their kryptonite.
Sonic asked, a smile making its way onto his face at the thought. He received two odd looks, and he almost snorted when they simultaneously tilted their heads in opposite directions. Sonic waved them off before they could ask. It must be an Earth thing then.
Never mind. We'll definitely look into their weaknesses.
In the morning, we can all go.
Sonic winced when Tails only gestured to the three of them, shooting a surreptitious glance to Knuckles' still-shut door. He wondered if Knuckles had eaten yet, if he had even left the room today. Half an hour later had Emmy and Tails on a walk, a meaningful look shared between the two of them before they left, sending a wave back to him, leaving signs in their wake. Sonic hummed to himself, shooting another look at Knuckles' door before he made up his mind. He scooped out another bowl of the still steaming soup before reaching into the now full fridge, grabbing a water bottle from inside and tucking it under his arm as well. He knocked on the Echida's door, sipping back as he waited patiently. The silence that followed left his ears ringing. Biting his lip, Sonic steeled himself and cracked open the door anyway, smiling faintly when he noticed it wasn't locked.
Knuckles.
His voice echoed in the quiet room, filled up the dark empty space. Knuckles sat on by the window, leaning into the curtains as he peered out from a slight crack. Pale moonlight left him in a silver sheen, highlighting the fatigue in his eyes and the bruises that lay underneath them. He turned when Sonic opened the door, eyes wide with fear until they settled upon his form.
"Oh, Sonic."
He breathed, his voice raw and raspy. His shoulders slumped in relief and he turned away from the window, leaving the curtain hanging open and allowing more slivers of light to spill into the room. Sonic smiled warmly, lifting the bowl slightly to draw Knuckles' attention to it before nodding to the floor. He took the bottle in his other hand, tossing it to his friend before carefully lowering himself to the ground. Knuckles caught the bottle with ease, his eyes never leaving Sonic as he stepped forward to join him, settling down in front of him.
Here.
Sonic passed him the bowl of stew, raising an eyebrow when Knuckles only stared into its depths.
Yeah.
Knuckles relented, dipping the spoon in and chewing on some of the soft meat. He nodded to himself at the taste, eyes slipping shut as he took another spoonful. Sonic sat back on his hands, eyes roaming what little he could make out of Knuckles' room that wasn't shrouded in shadows. Succulents lay upon the windowsill, few in comparison to the dozens around Sonic's room, and bathed in a silver sheen. The moon illuminated a kettlebell by Knuckles' bed, piercing its silver curves that peeked out from its position kicked halfway underneath. Out of the way, blankets sat strewn about the bed, as though Knuckles had tossed and turned before giving up and moving elsewhere. Sonic turned his head, but the other half of the room remained swallowed by the darkness, not even a glint of a reflection giving away what lay to his left. He hummed to himself to fill the silence of the room save the tapping of Knuckles' spoon against the rim of the bowl, a long-lost tone he couldn't recall that had stuck with him through thick and thin. Once Knuckles had set aside the bowl and drunk half of the bottle, Sonic nodded to himself. He needed to update Knuckles on their plans.
We wanted to go find information on that mysterious person tomorrow.
He said casually, wincing when Knuckles flinched at the reminder of the character. Knuckles nodded slowly and Sonic took that as his cue to continue.
We're going to the ring world to see if anyone has heard anything and we'll build a plan around that.
"I think I'll stay home."
Knuckles said softly, picking at the threads of the carpet they sat upon.
"It'll just be awkward with me there."
Sonic's heard Atch, a frown making its way onto his face before he rushed it away for a more supportive look.
Are you sure?
Knuckles nodded, looking down as he thought. Sonic jumped when Knuckles gasped, his mouth twisting in thought.
"What if they're there?"
Knuckles asked, raising shunning eyes to meet Sonic's own. Panic fluttered through his chest at the thought, but Sonic kept a nonchalant smile on his face.
Then we'll alert the officers. They all up, right?
Knuckles nodded, a relieved smile making its way onto his face, small as it may be.
"They would deal with it in a second. You met from, right?"
Sonic nodded.
"She'd take them down in the blink of an eye. What I'd give to see that.
Knuckles chuckled, and Sonic found himself laughing along, grateful for the soothing sound coming from his friend's lips. He had lost Knuckles. Sonic cleared his throat as the laughter died down, hating to ruin the moment but knowing he had to if they were going to find.
Do you remember anything about their appearance? My memory helped a little, but it was a bit blurry.
Knuckles grimaced, but he nodded.
I couldn't forget that face. Hold on.
He placed the empty bowl to the side, leaning back into the shadows and reaching out. After some shuffling and a clatter, he brought out a notepad and a pencil.
I can write down what I remember, but they haven't covered the rest of their body.
Sonic nodded, grateful for the small blessing regardless.
Let's see. They had Sandy for other white moves, though.
Knuckles murmured, jotting the words down as he spoke.
Freckles, I believe.
Sonic nodded.
Definitely. And something on their head. It made the cloak all weird.
Knuckles hummed, the scratching of the pencil filling the room.
They had blue eyes.
Knuckles shivered, his grip on the pencil tightening enough for a faint crack to be heard. Sonic frowned.
A pink nose, right?
Knuckles jumped, coming back to himself. He smiled gratefully, adding the information to his notes.
Yes, they wore that black cloak and didn't shoes. Most people, regardless of species, seem to wear shoes, so it might be worth noting.
Sonic made a face at the thought. Just because they were animals didn't mean they had to act like animals. It was savage, he thought. He took a long look at Knuckles as his friend tapped the pencil against the notepad and note, taking in the greasy, matted fur and exhaustion that seemed to hang from his bones, wearing down his frame and leaving him slightly slumped.
You should have a shower.
He spoke up, bringing Knuckles' attention back to him. Knuckles blanched, reeling back.
Excuse me.
Sonic snorted.
You look like you need one, and it'll make you feel better.
Knuckles' expression sobered and he nodded.
I guess, if you think it'll help.
He stood, but Sonic caught his hand before he could leave the room.
They don't hate you, Knuckles. Give it a little bit more time and everything will be set right. I promise.
Knuckles smiled wearily at him, but hope sparked in his dull eyes. He squeezed Sonic's hand before letting go.
All right, if you were sure, I trust you.
Sonic smiled.
That's all I can ask. Now you'll show her. You stink.
Knuckles gasped, affronted, earning a snicker from Sonic.
Coming from you.
Knuckles shot back, mirth swirling in his eyes.
Yes, and that's saying something. Now go.
Sonic made a shooing motion with his hands. Knuckles crossed his arms petulantly, shaking his head in disbelief as he left the room, even if his lips worked up at the quick banter. Sonic smiled at the achievement, picking up the bowl and placing the bottle of water by Knuckles' bedside table. He drifted out into the kitchen, smiling when he heard the steady stream of water from the bathroom by the stairs. A shower wouldn't fix everything, but Sonic had no doubt it would leave Knuckles feeling a little better. It was all he could ask for right now. He could do a little more though. Filling up the kettle, he flicked it on before grabbing another bottle of water. Placing it beside the second in Knuckles' room while he waited for the kettle to boil, he took out a mug, placing 2 tea bags inside, a part of him insisting that the Echidna would prefer it that way, that he always did. Fumes swirled around his face as he filled the mug, dropping in a spoonful of honey. Knuckles' throat no doubt needed it, and a dash of milk, just how he liked it, muscle memory told him. Sonic left the steaming mug alongside the bottles of water, nodding to himself with a smile before he slipped back into his own room. Tomorrow would bring about a whole new world of information, and he hoped that the person wouldn't be around to see them for it. Tonight, he could rest easy knowing he had done all he could for Knuckles, and that his friends were slowly on their way to rekindling the embers.